Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of the New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left. What's up, Neil?
In a good mood, Lance. It's a good day. Everything's going well. I hope you are as well.
I'm doing well. And let's jump right into it. Before we get into the program and put a lid on Sunday's game against the Patriots, I do want to say I just read some news where Joe Hayden is going to retire and he's going to be sign a 1 day contract, I believe, with the Browns and retire officially as a Brown. So congratulations to Joe Hayden on a fantastic career. Played some solid football with the Steelers. As always, if you want to check out the program, go to YouTube, do a search for Neil Coulon or Lance Williams. Also, if you want to check out the program via podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any of your podcast feeders, and do a search for Steelers and the New Standard. Also, want to give a shout out to show sponsor Peer Health. Also, want to give a shout out to my guy, Plant Based Planet, and Great Dads versus Everybody. Neil, let's put a wrap on um, Sunday's. I don't know if you want to. I'll just say Sunday's offensive performance. And let me just throw it to you this way with a couple of stats here. The Steelers right now are 30th in yards per play, 30th in yards per game, 26th in points per game, 32nd in yards per attempt in terms of the passing game, 26th in rushing yards per game, 23rd in rushing yards per attempt, 30th in TOP, and 32nd in first downs per play. There's been a lot of banter back and forth this week about culpability. And that's another word. We talk about sustainability and culpability. And culpability is always something that us fans, podcasters, media members like yourself, we always like to talk about. I mean, we don't want to do it, but we have to do it. A better word or a term for it that we always use is the blame game. When you're talking about offensive numbers that look like this, culpability and blame has to come up. I mean, I titled the last show, No Risk It, No Biscuit. It's time to start Guinea Picket. I mean, where are we at? And what do you see in terms of culpability and blame? What's the problem and what's going on with this offense? And if you could paint another brush on it, or you had the magic offensive salve, what would it be? What are you seeing? Who's culpable for this terrible offensive start?
First off, let's just get it on the record that when you transfer from accountability, when you're transferring for sustainability, like we're talking about, to culpability, things aren't going well. The bottom line is it's an exercise in futility to sit and act like one person being at the top of the blame list matters. It really doesn't make a difference. It's along with that, it's never one single person or entity in a game of football. And that's something we're going to get into when we talk about the Browns. But as far as where the Steelers are right now, I would blame, generally speaking, a passing concept that, in my opinion, seems to be rooted in Mitch, whatever you do, don't turn the ball over. I don't think that is sustainable. I don't think it's a very good idea. And I think it is most often behind the results that we're seeing. And they are, it's almost lockstep. If you don't want to turn the ball over, I don't think that anybody does. But if you make an active point to not turn the ball over, you're probably not going to turn the ball over, but you are probably not going to score a whole lot of points either. And that's where the Steelers are. Now, on the flip side of that, they've played in 2 close games. They've won one of them. To some degree, their defense is holding up. I don't think we have as much faith in that over the long haul because, frankly, the performance that Mac Jones gave on Sunday was not a whole lot better than what Mitch Trubisky did. They both turned the ball over, but Mac Jones made plays in bigger moments. Trubisky was zip. I mean, he really just brought nothing to the table in the whole game. Mike Tomlin speaks about his leadership and he's doing some things well. To me, what that really means is he's doing exactly what he's told to do. I mentioned this on a radio spot yesterday. I want to share it again. I was at a speaking engagement of former Ravens and Vikings offensive coordinator Brian Billick, head coach of the Ravens, coordinator for the Vikings. He said this, and it's always stuck with me. There are two types of quarterbacks: the type that won't do what he's told, and the type who only does what he's told. And in Billick's words, he said, "I'll take the former of those two any day." Mitch is the latter of the two. It seems to me what he is being told is protect the ball. Don't turn it over. Don't force it. Punts are okay. We have a defense. That philosophy really just doesn't work. And we saw in 2 games on Sunday alone, not over a long period of time, but just at the same time slot as the Steelers game, why it is you need to get the ball down the field. The Jets do not win the game against Cleveland, and we're going to talk about Cleveland more and what happened in that game. The Jets don't win that game if Joe Flacco, wearing number 19, by the way, how weird was that? If he isn't, willing to get the ball downfield, and he made a couple great throws at the end of that game. The Dolphins, if they just give up after 2 quarters of Lamar Jackson beating the ever-loving crap out of them, if they just decide, well, it doesn't matter as long as we don't turn the ball over, they have confidence in their passing game, their receivers, and their quarterback, and they uncorked it and came back and won. If you're not capable of doing that, let alone willing, you're probably not going to win a whole lot of games. So to sit and decide who's at fault right now for the Steelers, you have a scheme that is not taking safeties and forcing them into any kind of decision. So they are attacking downhill on you. Your receivers are starting to complain. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but they're saying weird things like, we were wide open all game. When your receivers are saying that to the media, you've got a problem on your
quotes
hands.
Here.
Let me finish this point, and I want to hear them because that's kind of where I was trying to go with this. All of these things are the responsibility of the offensive coordinator, and the offensive coordinator's performance is something you hold the head coach accountable to. The head coach is on the hook. The offensive coordinator is on the hook. The quarterback is the most important position in the NFL, probably in sports. There's no way he's not accountable to this. I don't want to get into what about. It doesn't matter about the line. The line has performed reasonably well to this point. We cannot take that away from them. Objectively, we can't say they have not stepped up from where they were in the preseason. The fact is your offense has no explosive capability, and you built your team to have that. But you have a quarterback that doesn't throw accurately enough to give them a chance for yards after the catch. He's not making decisions quickly enough. He bails out of the pocket, and he is constantly throwing from the position that you would throw in a quick game, which is to say he's throwing off his back foot. You're trying to get rid of the ball as quickly as you can. He's not stepping into anything aggressively and taking any shots down the field, which is to say you're not trying to be explosive, and you're going to continue to score 1 touchdown a game if that's what you want to do.
It's interesting that you say that, and let me get into the quotes. And when we're talking about culpability, it's always percentages of who, coach, coordinator, quarterback, line, skill players. But when you talk about philosophy, and I'm glad you talked about the philosophy, that's from the head coach. That's the head coach telling
General
them,
manager too.
yes, this is the type of football we want to play. This is the type of football we want to play. And if you've ever coached or if you've ever played, and big up to Coach Omar, you can't tell your team to not be aggressive. Like when you like if you try to tell a team to not be aggressive, they're going to make mistakes. You kind of got to just let guys go out there and rip it. Now, you can't say, Mitch, go throw the ball 100 times. You can't put him in those positions and put him in positions to throw the ball where he's not going to be successful. But you can't put the brakes on your offense and say, let's tread water. Our philosophy, which is not an offensive philosophy, is not turn the ball over. Let me get into some of the quotes from some of the skilled players. Deontay Johnson, we have to call the right plays to get the ball downfield in the right ways. Chase Claypool, we can only do what they tell us to do and execute it. Mitch Trubisky, we have to call concepts to get receivers there to the middle of the field. Pete Fryermuth, I think we've proven over the past 2 years we run better off tempo. We should sprinkle a little bit of that in.
Can we call him Pete Fryermuth from now on?
Pete Fryermuth.
That's one of your best ones.
It's, I mean, the village is not happy.
Oh,
the natives are restless.
It's terrible. I mean, this is, from what we've seen so far, Lance, this is legitimately the worst Steelers offense we've seen to start a season. There's no way you can really argue with that. We can point fingers all we want. When the team is actively doing that out in the open, you've really got a problem. And I don't want, if everybody watching and listening right now knows anything about me right now, it's that I'm not the guy who's going to find singular blame when it comes to a team problem. There are a lot of elements that go into this. Okay. Right now, for me, after having reviewed both of the games that they've played, really the only guy on offense I see playing at a consistently high level is Deontay Johnson. And he's done a great job doing what they've asked him to do to this point. He's not perfect, but I think he's playing better than anybody else is. I see issues with the receivers. You don't even need to have watched this show to know that I see a lot of problems with the quarterback. And the offensive coordinator is ultimately responsible for that. There are schematic issues, but at the same time, the players play. The coaches are calling what's out there. Trubisky is the one with the ball in his hand. I think I mentioned this on our post-game show on Sunday, Lance, but 3rd and 8, I think it was the first 3rd and 8 that they had in the fourth quarter. They're down 3 points. They're inside their own 20. They need to move the ball. They don't have a ton of time, but 3rd and 8, Belichick calls, I think it was a defensive back blitz off the strong side. Najee Harris, in doing what he's supposed to do, rolls to that blitzer and then turns around. Trubisky caught the ball, went to his back foot, and threw it to Harris. Maybe a second and a half total on that play. It's 3rd and 8. Najee Harris is not an open field player. He just isn't. Okay. On top of that, the fact that Belichick had 2 spill defenders immediately there between Harris and the sideline. They were both right on top of him right away. What that means is Belichick knew exactly what Trubisky was going to do when he blitzed off that side, and that's exactly why he did it. Trubisky didn't even compete in the play. It was automatic. It was robotic to him. Get the ball, blitz, throw immediately. You're not competing. You're 3rd and 8. You need to make a play. You're down 3 points. If you keep punting to the opponent, you're not going to score. And that's really what happened. That is as much schematic as it is decision-making from your quarterback. And that's the trap that they got into. And they lost the game, not because of that, but you had zero faith on 3rd down. There's no difference in 3rd down and a punt in this team anymore, just because their quarterback is clearly being told, or he's simply incapable of seeing more than 7 yards down the field, to protect the ball. Don't give it up. Don't take risks. You're not going to win like that. And they're not. I mean, I know that they beat the Bengals, but they didn't. I mean, they won the game. They didn't beat them. I mean, that should have been a loss. And the Bengals right now have not played well in all 9 of their quarters. They're not a whole lot different than the Steelers are.
Yeah, the offense is in a way. And the last quote I wanted to read is the quote from Tomlin on if he likes Canada's offensive play calling concepts. His answer was, I'm going to exercise patience. That's
fair.
I mean, that's absolutely hilarious. But
I mean, fans aren't. I'm glad he is. Fans aren't.
Yes.
And I don't know if they should. I mean, it's not good. It's not good. There's no other way around it.
And I want to bring in our special guest to break down this Browns game coming up. Neil, you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, let everybody know this is Cory Kinnan. He is the editor of Browns Wire, one of the sites on the USA Today Sports Media Group, NFL Wire Network. And we just brought Cory in fairly recently super excited to get him going. This will be the second game that he's been on with us, and there's not a thing that we need to teach him. He teaches us far more than we'll be able to teach him. And Browns are a really interesting team. He's plugged in. He knows full well. So thanks for joining us, Cory. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Happy to be here. Hopefully getting the taste of Sunday out of our mouth Thursday night. So
Sunday wasn't a good day for a lot of people.
Oh, man.
I don't think anybody listening had a good Sunday.
No, that game was unbelievable. I had to check the final score a couple of times to see that it actually happened when I was actually watching the game. I did not believe that the result was what it was. But before we jump into a breakdown of the game, Cory, why don't you give us a quick update on the injuries and where the Browns are standing injury-wise? I've read that there's some stuff going on with Myles Garrett. What's that look like going into this game?
Yeah, so Jadeveon Clowney is officially already out. He rolled his ankle against the Jets, and he's been ruled out for a couple days already. Chase Winovich, one of the rotational edge rushers, was placed on the IR this week as well. And now Myles Garrett, as Kevin Stefanski said, we'll see with Myles Garrett. So that's three defensive eds, three edge rushers right there who two of them for sure aren't going. And then, perhaps one of the best in the league might not go either. So defensive end is looking a little slim. So third round rookie Alex Wright is going to start, hopefully across from Myles Garrett. But if Myles Garrett doesn't go, then Browns are probably going to be starting Isaac Rochelle, who is currently on their practice squad, who they've activated from the practice squad once already. They'll probably start Isaac Rochelle if Myles Garrett can't go. So hope that Myles can go. And then offensively, you guys are familiar with Jesse James. Jesse James hit the IR this week as well. So the Browns are probably looking at a third tight end as well. Probably Miller Forstall off the practice squad. He's been up and down with the Browns the past couple of years. So on a short week, you're not going to go with a young guy. You're going to go with the guy who's had some familiarity with the team. So I would assume Miller Forstall is probably going to become that third tight end. And then Joel Bitonio as well. So one of the better guards in the league as well might not go in a short week after a pretty rough game against the Jets. So a few big names might not play for the Browns in this one.
That's actually where I was going to start. I started with Clowney's absence, which Stefanski ruled him out pretty much in the post-game press conference. They knew he wasn't going to play. It's the star power behind Cleveland's absences that kind of draw your attention. But let's talk about Clowney. I mean, the main value I see with him, certainly at this point in his career, is he's a good run defender. He's fundamentally sound. They bring him in to do that. Do you feel the Browns are able to make that up in the run game against a Steelers team that has improved over the last 2 weeks running the ball? I mean, they're certainly not at the Browns level of technical soundness, but they've gotten better. Do you feel that Clowney's absence in the run in particular is going to be a significant problem?
I mean, it helps that the Steelers' run game is anemic. I think that helps a little bit right now. But Alex Wright has been kind of a carbon copy of Jadeveon Clowney thus far as well. So not only do they look alike, but Alex Wright is a very strong edge setter. Alex Wright has a little bit of nuance to his pass rush game as well. I mean, it's yes. Anytime you lose a player like Jadeveon Clowney, it's going to hurt. But I believe with Alex Wright, it will be salvageable, at least salvageable defensively against the run. So,
in terms of the Steelers' defense going up against the Browns' offense, highlight a pressure matchup that the Steelers must win to have success in this game. And you pointed out that the Browns going into this game are having some issues up front with injuries.
Yeah. So again, so are the Steelers defensively up front, I guess. So that, it seems like everywhere that the Browns are banged up, the Steelers kind of are lacking there as well, which, you hate injuries. Offensively, I would say it's going to be in the secondary, or defensively, I would say it's going to be in the secondary for Pittsburgh. I think Ahkello Witherspoon is going to really be tested against Amari Cooper. Cooper only had one catch against the Carolina Panthers, but anybody who watched the tape saw him carve up J.C. Horn time and time again with only a handful of targets. And then he went 9 for 9 on catches and targets this week against the Jets. So Amari Cooper is well acclimated already into the offense, and he's already a weapon. And just looking at the cornerback depth for the Steelers, I think that could be a pretty unfavorable matchup. Again, Minka can cover a lot of insecurities in that secondary, obviously. So I think Minka will be all over the field again, as he always is. But I would say it's going to be Cooper anytime he's left on an island. Is he has a chance to really cut it up, because him and Jacoby already have shown some really good chemistry already. They're running a lot of boot, and the ball's in Cooper's face by the time he's getting out of his break. So there's a lot of trust, a lot of comfortability there between Brissett and Cooper already. So in a team that's not getting a lot of help elsewhere at wide receiver, it's going to be the Amari Cooper show, I think. So
that segues in perfectly. I was going to ask you about Cooper. That he stands out quite a bit. He looks really, really good. The connection with him and Brissett, you can almost see these are two veterans. These are two pro kinds of players. They're going to make hay with the opportunities that they get. I want to go into that a little bit. The value of that, knowing obviously with the suspension and how that's going to affect the Browns for the majority of the season. You bring in Cooper along with a veteran, as opposed to, you could have drafted somebody if you really wanted to do that. I don't think that they would have, but Cooper's presence, along with the at least the experience with Brissett, it's not going to reach great highs, I wouldn't think, but that's not an easy matchup to deal with anyway, right?
Mm-mm. Correct. And again, with Jacoby Brissett, like, the way I look at it is, going even back to Baker Mayfield a year or 2 years ago, the offense was already still extremely limited under him, and they just needed Mayfield to do just enough to keep them in games. And a lot of times last year, he didn't do that. Thus far, through 2 games, Jacoby Brissett has done just enough, and I would even say exceeded expectations, especially this past week, 22 of 27. He threw that pick, but there's 11 seconds left on the clock, no timeouts. You got to get in field range. He had to push the ball down the field. So, I mean, I'm a big subscriber to
Mitch Trubisky wouldn't throw that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a big subscriber to Football Outsiders, because I think they do a really good job of not of pinning down explosive plays, but of pinning down quarterback efficiency. And Jacoby Brissett right now is 12th in QBR, 7th in DVOA, 9th in DYAR. So, like, efficiency wise, he's playing at a top 10 level, which I think goes a lot. I think Kevin Stefanski is one of the top play callers, one of the top offensive minds in the league. He just knows, again, we're talking about a wide receiver core who, outside of Amari Cooper, has dudes who wouldn't be, who would struggle to be wide receiver 3s, wide receiver 4s on other rosters. And he just finds a way to get these guys open. He finds a way to get them in mismatches and get them open. So Jacoby just needs to play point guard. And again, if he sees Amari Cooper, in cover in like a man look, cover one look, he's probably going there, because that's what it was all day against the Jets, finding Cooper in one-on-one and going at him.
Speaking of that, and speaking of Jacoby Brissett, and looking at the game, he has played solid football. I mean, you guys are scoring points, moving the football, and like Neil said, I mean, if you do the quarterback comparison, I mean, there's no comparison. Jacoby Brissett is playing way better football.
Brissett has played 10 times better than Trubisky has.
Yeah, so they have a function. They have a functional offense that's actually scoring points and moving the ball. You talked about Patonio being out, and when you look at the Cleveland Browns offense, I mean, the foundation of that offense is running the football. Nick Chubb is a man amongst boys, and Kareem Hunt looks great. I mean, they look fantastic pounding the football. And regardless of the quarterback, they can run the football. They run the football well every single week, and we know that's going to be the foundation of what they bring into this game. In terms of the Patonio injury, how much will that impact the running game? And is there a matchup on the interior you're looking at for the Steelers to have success defensively against that vaunted running game?
Yeah, is Cam Hayward healthy? Is that I guess that would be my question.
Yes.
Yes. Well, then, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a bigger impact, because, again, you're starting your backup center as well. So because Nick Harris popped his Achilles, the first play of the preseason for the Browns as well. So you're starting Ethan Posick at center. But here, the Browns have had a wealth of depth at offensive line for 3 years now. And it seems like year in and year out, they pop guys in there and still don't struggle to do what they got to do, because these guys can move laterally, and they're going to force defensive linemen to get lateral with you. And I think that allows for cutback creases to open up when you're forcing a defensive lineman to consistently try to get lateral. Nick Chubb is just going to cut right back inside then off those hips. So time and time again, I like to say that Nick Chubb is the best running back in the NFL. He doesn't have the volume stats that Jonathan Taylor has. He doesn't have the volume numbers that Najee Harris had last year, because the Browns are trying to preserve his career, playing the position that has the shortest shelf life. So his carries haven't been up there.
He missed a bunch of
but
games
he's got
last year too.
the best eyes in the league. He did miss a few games last year as well, but he's got the best vision in the league, hands down.
Yep.
Lightest 227 pounds I've ever seen in my entire life. The way that dude gets in and out of his cuts, incredibly light on his feet. And then I like me and a buddy through that I've networked with through Brown's Twitter call Kareem Hunt the best finisher in the league. Nick Chubb is excellent at wide zone. He's got the eyes for the cutbacks. And then Kareem Hunt is very gap power oriented, and he's not afraid to just put his head down and punch you in the mouth. So, and again, they're the best finishers in the league, and you would have thought, going up 30-17 with 1:55 left would have helped to solidify that argument, but apparently it didn't. But on top of that, though, the Browns love their analytics and love efficiency. And so they're going to use data, and they see if we throw the ball on first down and stay ahead of the sticks, that gives us a better chance of winning. They threw the ball on first down a lot against the Jets and had a really large amount of success. So just because they are oriented towards running the football, they're going to try to get Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in these situations where, if you're on a 2nd and 5, the Browns can come out in 12, 11 personnel, 13 personnel. They can come out in any personnel they want. If they put 11 personnel on the field, the Steelers are probably putting a nickel back on the field, and the Browns are going to run it on. But if they come out in 12 and the Steelers come out in base, then yeah, they're going to throw it on 2nd and short. Because I think that's just how the Browns are wired. So, so as long as you stay ahead of the sticks, which they've done a pretty good job of the past 2 weeks, staying ahead. They had some pretty bad penalties against the Panthers, but as long as they stay ahead of the sticks, which they did against the Jets, I think this offense is geared towards efficiency and will do what it takes to just kind of, I like to say, as long as they can stay within 7 points, one way or the other, they're sitting pretty. They're sitting in a good territory where they can still win.
As much as this is a physical game and a scheme game and so on and so forth, a lot of it is a mental and emotional game as well. Where's this locker room at after that debacle and collapse? I mean, watching that game, true story. I mean, me and my dad are watching the game. We knew that the Jets won, but we were watching the game thinking, like, when do the Jets win? I mean, it's only like 2 minutes left. It's like 1:30 left. When does this happen? Oh, no. Oops. Bomb, touchdown. Okay, here it goes. I mean, we couldn't believe that the Jets won that game in the fashion that they won the game. Football is emotional. It's a short week. It's Thursday. I mean, what's the tenor in that locker room?
Yeah, you're going to find a lot about this team on Thursday night, coming back from that on a short week. How do they come out against the Steelers? Because, I mean, the locker room guys are saying all the right things, except for the secondary, which ironically is probably where the most star power is. So the most egos are as well. You have guys like Denzel Ward, who by all accounts was a top 5 corner last year and got justifiably paid because of that, saying it wasn't my coverage. You have Grant Delpit saying, I'm not playing the blame game. You have John Johnson saying, oh, the calls are being made, so I don't know. But then you also have guys like Anthony Walker, middle linebacker Anthony Walker, who says, I have the green dot, it's on me. You have guys like Nick Chubb saying, you know what, I shouldn't have scored that last play. I should have gone down. We could have milked the clock. We could have won. That's on me. You have guys like Amari Cooper saying, I didn't get on the onside kick. That's on me. So as much ego as there is in the secondary, and the secondary is truly where it needs to be figured out, because if you look at the game against the Panthers, they were dominating the Panthers. They were all in Baker Mayfield's face. They couldn't run the football, but they let 2 blown coverages let the Panthers back in it. 65% of the yards that Carolina had in week 1 came on 2 blown coverages and a screenplay into pressure. That's it. This week, they let Joe Flacco pick them apart. I don't know what was happening this week, but it was just like anytime Joe Flacco dropped back, you knew there was a gap somewhere. So the secondary's got to figure it out. There's too many big names, too much talent in that secondary to be. I mean, you have a first rounder in Greg Newsome, you have a top 5 corner in Denzel Ward, you have one of the higher paid safeties in the league in John Johnson, you have a 2nd round pick in Grant Delpit. There's just no reason this should be happening. But I do think they have the leaders in the locker room to kind of keep it straight in Anthony Walker and Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper, because again, their pressure rates are extraordinary. Their linebacker play, like PFF grades are, just a piece of the puzzle, not the full thing. But Anthony Walker and JOK are 2 of the higher graded linebackers in the league right now. So it truly is just secondary figures it out and they're rolling. But if you don't give time for Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney to get home, then it doesn't matter because quarterbacks can 3-step drop you all day. So
it's hard to not discuss the manner in which the Browns lost against the Jets and what happened with the Carolina game in week 1. and you hit on it. I was going to ask you about the gaffes in the secondary, but I wanted to start it with this. If you're putting the fact that Nick Chubb scored a touchdown to go up 13 points
Exactly.
at the same level of a defense that, objectively speaking, seemed to have completely lost the deep threat on the Jets in a play that you're in a deep shell defense and they're clearly throwing the ball deep, something is wrong. It's not necessarily on your running back. Just to clarify, just because I took a bunch of heat for this in social media for suggesting it, Nick Chubb should have gone down. Okay, I think we can all say that. Mathematically, the game is over if he goes down. Yeah. He didn't. He scored. You're up 13 points with a minute 20 left in the game. You should win the game too.
Pretty handily, yeah.
You shouldn't give up a touchdown, let alone two, along with the. It shouldn't even be close to a 50-50 proposition on an onside kick. The fact that Chubb gets lumped into that, who I agree, to go back to your earlier point, I agree with you, and I'd even put more of an emphasis on it. Nick Chubb is the best running back in the game. I don't think it's even particularly close. All around ability, he's the best. He does everything that's there. Maybe another time, or for the I forget when the Steelers play the Browns again, we'll talk about that Week 17 game last year when Stefanski decided to destroy Baker Mayfield, I guess, and not use Chubb at all against the Steelers in a game that both Lance and I said there's no way Pittsburgh has a chance to win this because they're going to run Chubb 25 times and the Steelers can't stop Water from running uphill at this point. But the idea of the Browns secondary right now, the holes that are there, it's not like Wilson just beat them down the field. They didn't even know he was there. Flacco has an arm. It's not that he doesn't know the game and he can't make a play or two, but it made it awfully easy on him. What exactly is the status within the secondary right now? What do you see the problems as being? Because Browns very easily should be 2-0 if they made 4 or 5 plays against Carolina easily. Against the Jets easily.
Yeah. Again, I think a lot of it comes down to ego. And again, they've already had a players only meeting, so maybe they had a chance to scream at each other and flush this out a little bit. I mean, there's fans calling for Joe Woods' head, and I do think there's some merit to this falling back on the coaching a little bit. But at the same time, if the coach is making the play, like calling in the plays, and the players on the field aren't executing, that's a player issue. But there could be an issue where even at how smart Joe Woods, and I think he's a great defensive coordinator, looking at how they played the last 7 games of the year last year, they were a pretty dominant defense. But at some point it comes to maybe Joe Woods is just not a good communicator, and like his teaching points aren't getting across. And at that point, that is a coaching thing. If it's coming this far and things still aren't fixed, then something's not sinking in. It's either the way you're communicating, the verbiage you're using, something. And I think that is a coaching thing. Again, I don't think a good team that is looking to compete, and I think the Browns can compete this year, will fire a coach 2 weeks into the season, 3 weeks into the season. But it's definitely time to look in the mirror. But I do think there is a lot of ego. Again, Grant Delpit, one of the better defensive backs in college football, to a second-round pick, and Denzel Ward coming off a top 5 season and a payday, and John Johnson coming off of a payday 2 years ago and being known as one of the better safeties in the league, and Greg Newsome, a first-round pick last year. So there's just a lot of ego in that secondary. It's got to get figured out, though. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine with what's going on back there. But I know they've been attacking it this week, the communication issues this week. So they've also been rotating the green dot player. So Anthony Walker hasn't been on the field every single defensive down. They're trying to get Jacob Phillips some reps too at Mike linebacker, so they both have a green dot. And I think that's probably causing a little bit of communication issue too. Like when you have 2 different players trying to relay calls from the sideline, it doesn't really go too well. So I think sticking to one green dot would probably help the issue a little bit too. So, but really it's on the secondary. It's on those guys who are, your higher profile players on the entire roster to figure it out.
Browns have put a lot of money into their secondary, a lot of capital into their secondary. I thought that would have been the strength of their defense, but I don't think we've seen that yet.
Because the thought is you build your defense back to front. You might be able to get away with just rushing 4, and Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney can still get home if your secondary is as good as they should be. And so that's kind of what they've just been doing, is just bringing 4. But this secondary isn't doing their job.
Fortunately for the Browns, you're playing a Steeler team that has not been aggressive in throwing the ball downfield and has not used concepts so far the first two games that's going to stress the communication issues of a secondary. So you might be okay in a short week going up against this offense and getting everything corrected. It may not tell you what you actually are, but it might be a get right game for your defense and for your secondary, playing a team that's only scored 2 offensive touchdowns in 9 quarters. Before we let you go, I want you to give me a stat line from an offensive player that would indicate a Browns victory.
That's a good question. As long as Jacoby Brissett no, that's not what I'm going to do. Man, that's a good one. I like that. Man, that is a good question. I'll stick with Jacoby Brissett. Yeah, as long as Jacoby Brissett has more. No, that's an obvious one. Has as many touchdown passes or more interceptions, they win. So even if he throws 1 touchdown pass, no interceptions, they win the game.
Okay.
So +1 in the TD pass
+1
column.
in the TD pass column. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Because he
Can
probably
I
will throw
finish with
just
this?
1 touchdown. But hey, that's what it does, and that's what it does.
Right here, live on this show, Corey. Who does Joe Hayden belong to? The Browns or the Steelers?
The Browns. I think Joe Hayden choosing the Browns makes up that decision for
Certainly
us.
does, doesn't it?
Yes.
I was walking into the gym and I saw the tweet from Schefter. I was like, oh wow, that's kind of a message, isn't it? Not a coincidence. He waits till week 3 of the NFL season to retire. And certainly, if you look at the state of the Ravens secondary right now, I think literally all of them are hurt. You would have thought if he had interest and there was interest in him, it's a golden opportunity for him there. If he waited this long to say he was retired, he's waiting for the primetime game against the Steelers. I think there's something there. I think there's something to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool for him that he gets to do that with both the Browns and the Steelers. There, he gets to be honored with the
great guy and a great player throughout his career.
I tweeted it out, but I mean, I've watched some really bad Browns football from he was drafted in 2010, so even before that, but from 2007 through 2018, I've seen some really bad Browns football, and for the most part, there were two dudes who were just bright spots throughout, and it was Joe Thomas and Joe Hayden. So I'll always have a soft spot for Joe Hayden because some of those matchups with him and AJ Green, for some reason, it's like Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans. Mike Evans could not do anything against Marshawn Lattimore. AJ Green could not get anything against Joe Hayden throughout his career. So I will always treasure those games of watching the Browns and Bengals go at it back in the prime of both of their careers. And again, he was one of the few bright spots on some really bad football teams. So.
And before we let you go, I think we're all going to agree Joe Thomas is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
He better be. He better be.
I can't imagine anybody would say he's not. First ballot Hall of Fame stuff usually gets political to some degree. You have to be. I think his problem is he's going in a pretty loaded class for first ballot guys. I mean, he retired at the same time as some obvious Hall of Fame players, so maybe one of them gets left out, or it probably bumps down a few of the others. But Revis would be my number one of that group, but Thomas is a pretty close second. There's no way he's not getting in the Hall, and he absolutely deserves it. As big of a Steelers troll as he's become, there's no doubt that he needs to be in the Hall of Fame immediately.
It's pretty incredible to go 10 seasons, never miss a game, and make 10 Pro Bowls, and then you only miss a game when you blow out your elbow the way he did that forced him to retire. It's the only time he's ever missed a game. The only time he's ever missed a Pro Bowl is in his 11th season. So, and then 6 All-Pros too on top of that. So 6 of those seasons, that's just.
And keep in mind the All-Pros he went up against, all those guys are in the Hall. I mean, it was loaded at tackle at that point. You saw the escalation of the proliferation of passing offenses in the NFL. You needed to have those tackles at that point, and Thomas was tip of the spear. I mean, he might have been the best of all of them at that point. But you had so much talent in what they were doing, and he was such a transcended player.
On a really bad team, yeah,
on a really bad team. But I look, you know what? Who else is on the first ballot is James Harrison, and that's something, Lance, you and I will get into it at some point. But James Harrison, I can go back and forth on this. It's not worth the space now. But what I know is that the tackle who gave James Harrison by far the most amount of trouble was Joe Thomas. And Harrison was a unique player in the sense that he was so much shorter than your prototypical tackle. And he bent. He was really flexible and really powerful in his lower body. Thomas was the only one who was able to get down with him and take him around the arc. And that says a lot, because that was Harrison's game. He was such a physical freak in comparison to everybody else who played his position. Another first ballot guy, Dwight Freeney, probably going to get in, was similar in that way. And Freeney was probably faster, but Harrison was so strong on the edge. Thomas gave him fits in the run game. And Harrison, in my opinion, is the best run defending outside linebacker of his generation. Thomas could do that. The Browns weren't able to do much despite it. But if you looked at them one-on-one, it was a battle. That was football at its best. Those two, it's just a phenomenal matchup every time they played, and they got a lot of games in.
And I love this discussion, and we could talk about ball and these guys forever. But before we let you get out of here, Cory, we need a prediction.
So on my podcast, I said 24-14 Browns. Again, I do think this is the week. I mean, this is a get check week for that secondary. And again, they're too talented. So I think this is the week they have to strap it down. If not, somebody's getting fired. Somebody's getting fired on that defensive staff. So I think this is the week that they strap it down. And again, the Steelers offense, I don't have to mince my words with you guys. It's just anemic. Like it's bad. So I don't see how they score more than 2 touchdowns.
2 is a lot.
2's a lot. Yeah. So I think like 24-14. Because I think the Browns offense can stay efficient. I think they can stay ahead of the sticks. I think they can still run the ball even with Joel Bitonio out. They've done it in the past, sticking just random guys in there and still being able to move the football. So I tend to think this is a 2-score win. If it's 2 scores with 1:55 left, I still won't be breathing easy, but I think it's a 2-score win.
They've robbed you of that security. That
2 weeks in a row they have, yes.
Well, Cory, I want to thank you for hopping on to program. Hopefully we can have you on again later this year. Fantastic information. Everybody out there who's listening, make sure you go to Browns Wire. I'm sure, Cory, you got a bunch of stuff loaded up for these next 2 days, which are going to be very busy for you on the Thursday and the short week. So again, thank you for hopping onto the program. Thank you, Cory, for everything.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Cory.
Yeah.
So Neil, I'm gonna throw it to you. What's your prediction for this game? We got Cory 24-14. What's your prediction?
I was kind of on the same lines. 24-13 might even be what I say. 24-16. Thursday games are so fluky. It's so tough, and injuries. I mean, we really don't know what's going to happen with Garrett. That's significant. If they lost Garrett and Clowney going into this game, at that, I don't know if they have enough to even stop an anemic, as he said, Steelers offense. So that's tough. I agree with him completely. He used the word efficient a bunch. That's the best way to describe the Cleveland offense. When you can run zone and you have a running back that can see where he needs to go in that scheme, you're going to be successful. Over time, you're going to be successful. I think they'll have 3 and outs, but they'll get Chubb the ball a bit more than they have, whether he was out or whether they just, for whatever reason, decided to throw the ball 45 times like they did last year. They're going to get Chubb the ball in this game. I think they are. You're going to see him eat out of outside zone, and I don't think the Steelers are going to be able to keep up with that toe-to-toe. I don't think they're going to be able to have the same kind of running success. I'm going to say 23-13 Browns.
I'm going to be the one voice of dissent here. I think when you look at the Steelers offense, I mean, everything that you guys are saying is absolutely true. The offense is anemic. We have not seen them move the ball consistently. We haven't even seen them be aggressive in the passing game. They're not pushing the ball downfield. But like you said, Thursdays are weird. And Thursday divisional games are even weirder. And we don't know if Garrett and Clowney are going to play, but the one thing we do know, even if they do play, they're not going to be anywhere near close to 100%. The one positive that I saw in offensively in the game against the Patriots is that you did start to see the offensive line play much better. Of course, Cory, I think, said it very well that, PFF is just part of the puzzle. But you did see multiple offensive linemen for the Steelers get really good PFF grades for the game. You saw them make some hay in the running game. Unfortunately, you saw Najee Harris running the black shirts consistently.
Let's
But
get into that a little bit. I think
we'll talk about that. We saw some positives on that offensive line. So I'm thinking, and you're talking about a team, you have to be creative to lose with a minute 20 up 13. Something's going on there.
That was just weird.
I mean
it was
that
just
something's
like,
going on there. I mean, it was so bad. I thought that
those
the
were
Jets
two
won in overtime.
those were two like season level gaffes on both of
Yes.
those plays. And it's just like, credit to Flacco. This is kind of the funny thing. And I got in conversations with people about that this week. Flacco just doesn't give a fuck. Flacco will throw the ball wherever on the field, and you get the turnovers that come with it. But Flacco is the perfect quarterback for that kind of situation. The Browns just gave it to him. There was a lot of talk in Minnesota recently about 4th and 26, the famous play that McNabb made against the Packers on Monday Night Football to convert that 4th and 26 and go on and win the game. When you are facing that large of a distance as a defensive team, people tend to want to yell at the scheme. Like, your scheme was wrong. Guys aren't where they're supposed to be. They're all playing back, which means you're giving up a completion underneath in bounds for the sake of making the tackle and letting the clock continue to run. If that player breaks free of that, I'm sorry, that's not a schematic issue. That's a want to issue. And I saw that among Cleveland secondary more than anything in both games. Cleveland against Carolina and against the Jets. They didn't really want to. I didn't see them really coming up to play all that hard. And I think that's what ended up happening with them. That's really bad, though. I mean, just to put it into historical context, it doesn't happen. It's almost mathematically impossible for all those things to happen. The get back factor of this for the Browns is pretty high.
Yeah, that comeback was so weird that I'm telling you, when me and my dad were watching the game, we thought that the Jets won in overtime. We were like, they must have won in overtime. Like we just figured, like,
plenty of time.
We just figured,
they
like,
need overtime.
It's like, wait a minute, like they must have won in overtime. Because I'm thinking, like, okay, they tied the game up somehow. Like, somehow I'm thinking this goes to overtime. I'm thinking, like, there's no way. There's a minute 20. Like, when do they win the game? I think that type of stuff hangs over. I think there's a get back factor, obviously, but I think that type of stuff hangs over. And I think the Steelers take advantage on a short week. I like the Steelers to win this game. I think you're going to get some turnovers. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think it's going to look a lot like the Patriot game in some instances. And I'm going to take the Patriots score. And I think the Steelers win this game Thursday 17-14. But if the Steelers came out and scored one touchdown and got beat, 24-10, that's plausible as well. I mean, you're talking about, a team that scored 2 offensive touchdowns in 9 quarters, and the only team that's probably worse than them offensively in the National Football League is the Indianapolis Colts, who got shut out by Jacksonville, and you should not get shut out in 2022. There is no reason to get shut out in the National Football League currently. But so my prediction is 17-14 Steelers. I got you down at what, 24-16?
So 23-13 Browns.
23-13 Browns. And Cory has it at 24-14 Browns. And so I'm going with the Steelers. I think they win this game somehow. I'm not very confident in that pick. If I were gambling, I would give you 4.5. I would give 4.5 points to any team that scored 2 offensive touchdowns. And I would take the under if I was gambling on this game. But I'm going to go with the Steelers because I have, for some reason, I'm blindly optimistic this year over the first 4 games. Somehow I'm picking the Steelers. But I want you, before we get off the show, to talk about the Najee issue. You were just going to start bringing it up. Talk about the Najee issue, his vision or lack thereof.
I think, and I had this in the B-roll of questions I was going to ask Cory. I decided it was probably a little too technical for something like this. But if you were to watch, and maybe we'll see this come Thursday, if you were to watch Nick Chubb and then watch film of Najee Harris, you're going to see two polar opposite players. And the thing Cory touched on is the main reason. Nick Chubb has excellent vision. He sees where he needs to go and he gets to that spot. Najee doesn't seem to quickly identify a crease in which through he can run. It's not entirely your blockers paving a 5-yard wide hole. You don't need to be a great player when you have that type of running room. You don't get it very often in the NFL. There are very well schemed, very well executed plays, and the running back can hit that and go, but it doesn't happen really all that often. You've got to make hay with what's there. What that means is you're getting an acceleration when you get the ball. While you're doing that, you're identifying where it is that you have the room to go. And from there, what they teach is perfect is 0 to 1 move through a hole to beat everybody, to run wild down the field. And from there, it's just a foot race. A really good NFL running back is going to be 2-3 moves. There are a couple different things that you need to do. And that doesn't mean you do it to fake somebody out. It means you're moving to a different spot where somebody isn't. I know that seems simple, but that's part of your vision. Think of it like chess. The best chess players are 15 moves ahead of their opponent. They know what's going to happen in sequence from their decision to do this. That's going to make everybody else do that. Everybody here probably remembers Le'Veon Bell pretty well. Excellent vision, probably the best vision of a running back during his day, and maybe at the same level as Chubb. Bell was not an exceptional athlete. He was not overly fast, that's for sure. He was exceptionally quick on his feet, but he knew where guys were going to go and he set them up. That's where the patience part of him came from. He's behind the line of scrimmage, seeing what's going on because he had the vision to know he can react one way or another depending on what they're doing coming after him. Najee has none of that right now. Now, to some degree, that's an acquired skill. You need to get experience. You need reps. You need carries. He's had a lot of carries, and I gave him a pass last year for a lot of those things because he was a rookie. What we've seen through 2 games right now is concerning. It's really not very good. He has not played well. It's not a question of just your yards, and it's not entirely about the offensive line. Nick Chubb is going to get tackled a couple times for a loss. He's going to have a couple 0 runs. Watch the amount of 8 to 12-yard runs he has in this game. And I guarantee you most of that is by him making a move, going to where somebody isn't, and getting up the field. Najee doesn't do that. He moves horizontally too much, which destroys the little speed that he has, and defenders can key in on him and make an easy tackle. You're a lot harder to take down if you're moving, especially if you're a big guy. You have a lot of momentum going forward. Najee kills that momentum because he stops where he is and tries to shake and juke instead of getting up the field, finding wherever there is a crease, at the very least, trying to fall forward for 2-3 yards. He has a lot of 0 gains because he's not really doing a whole lot with what he has. I understand he doesn't have a perfect hole every time to run through. Again, though, doesn't take talent to do that. The talent is making something that isn't totally there. And Najee doesn't do that well. That's vision. Najee has a problem with that. It's a film room thing. You hope he puts in the work. But Lance, if I'm challenging any Steelers player this week, it's Najee Harris. He's got to play a lot better than he has because I feel he has the ability to do that. I don't think Mitch Trubisky can help himself because I just don't think he's talented enough to do much better than what he is. Najee should be a lot better than this.
The one thing about Le'Veon Bell that you failed to mention is he has a hell of a right hand too. Just ask Adrian Peters.
I saw the headline that he won. Amazingly enough, I never saw the highlights of the fight that 500 people probably watched.
He KTFO'd.
Was it pretty bad?
He KTFO'd Adrian Peterson. Take a look at it on YouTube. He set him up nice, just like he used to set up runs in the hole. He set up Adrian with the lead right hand, and he KTFO'd Adrian
all
Peterson.
Vision.
It was pretty funny, and it looked like him slow playing a hole and pressing it slowly and then accelerating because needless to say, Adrian Peterson, he's not going to win any tough man contests. But Neil, anything you want to promote? Anything before we get out of here?
I got nothing. Just check out Cory's stuff. We're really excited for him. Kurt on Steelers. I'm looking forward to it. I think Thursday night games can be kind of a slog. It's tough for me. I got to get up pretty early to get working on stuff. But I like the Steelers Thursday night games. You hope to get a win out of it. I'm not incredibly confident. I'm looking forward to being wrong.
And hopefully, I think we're going to do something. Definitely, we're going to bring you a post game. For sure. Thursdays, like Neil said, are very weird. So look for the post game and go Steelers. I think the Steelers get this win. Cory and Neil do not, but that's why we play the game. We will see. Thursdays are very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what that offense looks like on a short week. That could be huge. That could be very brutal. Looking, whoa. I don't know what a scaled back Steeler offense looks like with short prep. I don't.
Just going to play with 9 guys on the field. I mean, that's the only way I think they can be less effective than they have been.
That's pretty scary. But with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the program. As always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.